and therefore though the Supreme Court judgment appears very ethical and moralistic in its design, that it wishes to help the worst of social groups to come out of their precarious condition and become part of the mainstream. So somewhere it appears that there is a ethical moralistic appeal by the Supreme Court to deal with the sub-categorization issue. But as we all know, that probably there is much more into this debate. For that matter, I was just joking with some of the other faculty members in my center that if you see the Supreme Court judges or the executives of 500 Fortune companies today, or even the awardees of Bharat Ratna, or even an IPL team, what is the common between all of them? The commonality between all of them are they all belong, majority of them belong to the social elite groups. Okay, and this was the question that has been coming through in a very aggressive manner during the general elections time, when social justice and constitutionalism became a very major issue to mobilize the Dalits. And for the rebirth of the Congress party, it is the Dalits' political participation, it is their vote. Of course, Muslims and other marginalized communities were part of that mobilization, but it is the Dalits that sincerely committed themselves to the revival of the Congress party and created a new uproar. And therefore, the idea of social justice and constitutionalism become a core of the current political discussion. Further in that debate, it was also suggested that the horizon of the social justice policies need to be expanded, that it should not be just limited to the state framework, to the public sector, to the government sector. It needs some kind of an extension, some kind of a expansion in the private economy, in the new liberal economy. Why? Because as many of amongst us are writing, that the pie of the cake is shrinking every day. The jobs in the government sector are no more available, and therefore unless and until we expand that to a bigger forum of liberal economy, market economy, only after that probably there is a possibility of social justice in an economic forum. So that demand was rising in a very, very substantive way in last 10 or 20 years, and between that you will find that the core principles of social justice, which are, of course, I'll just come about those principles that I think are crucial. You will find that the judiciary is not taking cognizance of those values and principles that the forefathers of the Indian Constitution imagined at that part of time. For that matter, the idea of social justice is, of course, not about some jobs in the state institutions. It is, of course, the battle was about social dignity, self-respect, and counting individuals as human beings. That was the initial battle. Finally, social justice principle also imagine a better world order, that though annihilation of caste was one of the major tasks that was unfulfilled by the modern India, but that was the imagination. So it has that kind of a longer and very imaginative idea about the modern nation state. When we see the current judgment on scheduled castes and scheduled tribes bifurcation, you will find that this particular aspect, these principles are clearly neglected by the judiciary. There was no discussion about what they call the implementation and the flaws, and Avinash already talked about the roster system and multiple flaws that are there vis-a-vis the implementation of the reservation policies. That though there are overarching presence of Dalits in the group D, B and C, but when it comes to group A and B, it's just a minimal representation. And therefore these lacunas, this lack of the will of the political establishment to fulfill reservation and create a kind of a space, a political or institutional space which is harmonious and which is participatory by the vulnerable social groups, that possibility has not been examined by the Supreme Court. Second, in this particular categorization, you will also see that those who have benefited, a very small number of people who have benefited from the social justice policies, mainly reservation policies, you will find that there are hints in the judgment that there is some kind of a reprimand or some kind of villainization of those groups who are benefited from the social justice policies, mainly calling them dominant or exploiters or the beneficiaries. It appears that it is hardly understood that though they are part of the what you call mainstream state institutions today, but the blot of untouchability, the blot of caste discrimination has not went away, and therefore though a small section among the Dalits, among the Adivasis have become part of the what you call the state institution, but the arena of discrimination for that matter is still around, and they still face a similar kind of discrimination though they are part of the mainstream, and therefore this particular reprimand of the people who got a minimal benefit from the social justice appears very, very troublesome to me. Second, further, though you can make this particular call that certain groups have benefited, but we need to have some kind of an empirical data to prove that. And probably on that account, again the Supreme Court, if you read the judgment, again the Supreme Court is suggesting that they do not have that kind of enough empirical data to support and promote that. It will of course create multiple political institutional hurdles. Avinash spoke about that the implementation, already there are multiple crises and controversies vis-a-vis implementation. If you create another corridor within the corridor, you will find that the implementation on that particular group, that Dalits are A, B, C, D, and how to implement that policy again becomes very, very difficult. Third, of course, the Supreme Court is not thinking about, as I said, that there are already a shrinkage of jobs in the government sector, and there are already multiple demands by the scheduled caste groups or even the tribals or even for that matter the OBCs to expand the horizon of social justice policies vis-a-vis the liberal economy. The Supreme Court has not even engaged on that particular scale and have not suggested that there should be an increase of the state welfare policies. There should be more affirmative action policies for the Dalits and the Adivasis, rather than it suggested that there are certain groups which are benefited out of this particular logic and therefore they should be excluded. And therefore probably there is a kind of a hidden agenda, as I said, that in the last 2 decades, the way Dalits and the Adivasi groups, social movements, intellectuals and other influential sections have articulated their position vis-a-vis reservation, suggesting that there should be an expansion. And I think somewhere the judiciary has continuously challenged and targeted that. Initially with the idea of creamy layer amongst the OBCs, later on with the EWS reservation, and now with the claim that the Dalits are heterogeneous group and there are certain what you call lagging behind people, and for their help there is a requirement of a policy reform. These are some of the tactics through which multiple other issues that the Dalits are now claiming to argue, which are they are basically proposing that the social justice is not only about this particular claim of job representation, but there should be a major appeal to change the structure of polity and economy. That claims are avoided by this deliberation and discussion, and therefore it is not a kind of an easy attempt where the Supreme Court appears ethical and moralist, suggesting that it is helping the worst of social group. I think there is beyond that kind of a facade, there is more to deliberate, and that if we can understand that particular possibility, I think we'll understand the dynamics of this particular policy. Thank you for listening to me today.